Life check yourself. Breaking free from burnout. Michelle Rios talks redefining success, wealth, and fulfillment. Wowzy, another amazing episode in store of Life Check Yourself. Extraordinary women on the show. And here is another one for you to savor and delight in. Today I have Michelle Rios on the show. She's a transformational coach of choice for CEOs, entrepreneurs, leaders, and other high achievers. And I love this, seeking more than just traditional success, which is what we're going to talk about. What she is, her superpower is guiding highly accomplished individuals through a profound self-discovery process. She works with people to unlock their full potential and cultivate a greater sense of purpose, alignment, freedom, and joy in their lives. She's a certified executive coaching professional. She's been doing this for 25 years. She's got an award-winning career as a communications leader, agency executive, and trusted advisor to top leaders across the globe. And she has an amazing podcast called Live Your Extraordinary Life. And I'm just super excited to chat to you. And I'm so glad that we got introduced from another one of our guests, Lorna Poole. So I'm glad you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Marnie. I'm excited to get going.
Yeah. So I'm really curious about when you talk about beyond, let's just talk about that first, like beyond traditional success. What do you think is going on right now with entrepreneurs, leaders, people who have been following the rules, getting to the next level, but feel stuck? Like, what is it that they want, and what is traditional success, and why is that not working for people anymore?
Oh, such good and juicy questions to kick us off. Well, first of all, let's start with what traditional success is. And I think we see so much of it, and we grew up with so much of it splattered all over the covers of, flashy magazines and in our pop culture. It was you were successful if you arrived and had the corner office and the designer clothes and the luxury cars and jet setting across Europe and the handsome spouse to match and all of those things. And I think that those were really held up and have continued to be held up by society as the ideals we're supposed to follow. I'm getting ready to launch a kid out into the college arena. And it's interesting to me that even being in this field of personal development and having these very progressive conversations around the dinner table, I still have a kid who sometimes falls into that trap of like, when I get the house and when I have the car and when I have and I, have to kind of pull him back and say, remember, that is not going to lead to happiness. Those are nice things to have. But if you're thinking that once you have these things, then you'll be happy, that's a really serious trap to fall into. So traditional success, it's the things, right? The materialistic things outside of us, the accolades, the titles, the money, the status. And I think what we've come to realize is a lot of us chase those things. Mm-hmm. A lot of us got those things and we were still like, not feeling uber fulfilled. Why not? And
so important.
I think there's this realization that's coming of age, right? It's out there. A lot of us now recognize it as like, what are the things that really bring fulfillment? I want to sleep well at night. I want to fall asleep relaxed and fully at ease at who I am in my own skin. And what I've done over the last 25 years is really look at the patterns. What are the patterns? When do people really have that sense of ease with who they are, excitement for their day? It's when they're living authentically, when who they are on the inside is reflected in the activities and the things they engage on the outside. When that happens, it's like magic.
I love this. It's funny. I'm like a huge football fan. So we're recording this after the Super Bowl. And I saw this quote from one of the Eagles players. And he wrote that he worked his whole life to win the Super Bowl. And he did. And he said that, it was surreal because the excitement and that like, oh my God, like this is it. He said it faded after exactly 2 days.
Mm.
And he said nothing changed. And he said, what I really love, and then he goes into like, I love practicing. I love being out on the field and doing the thing. I love the journey, right? That is really the joy in my day. And I thought, that is so amazing. It's such a great metaphor because even for me, like writing my book and seeing it in the bookshelf and all that, you're like, that's amazing, right? And then also like, and also it's the journey, right? And so yes. I think that the first thing that you're saying is you have to kind of debunk the myth, like you're doing with your son, right? That like, don't fall for the trap that when you achieve this thing and you sell your soul or have burnout or whatever it is, that then finally you'll feel free or feel happy or content.
That is spot on, 100% it. You know, look, I talk all things extraordinary living. So, you know, initially when I started my own show, Live Your Extraordinary Life, everyone kept saying, well, easy for you to say, you just came back from this phenomenal trip in the Mediterranean. You were on the waterfront mansion on the, you know, yes, but with a great deal of authenticity to it. I had a lot of that. I didn't grow up with anything. I grew up in a very, you know, impoverished environment. My parents were teenagers when they had me. And so we did a lot of like self-made experiences to kind of arrive. But the myth I grew up with was once you arrive at having the corner office and making bank and having all the things, then you're going to find the joy that you was missing in your childhood. And the big, you know, beep, 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 you know, for me was not so fast. In fact, the journey for me became so miserable because it was about getting the things and the status and the titles and the awards because I thought that that was what was missing. I was the oldest. I was put out into the world first. I had to kind of go and get all of those things to kind of prove it wrong for my family, right? We grew up with, well, we don't have money. So if you get some, that's the missing link. We didn't have status. So if you get some, that will make things change. And what I found is I kept showing up as me to all these places and feeling like, this isn't it. This isn't it. And not only is it not it, but the process that I am going through, my journey of getting to these things and chasing these things is slowly but surely killing me because it wasn't authentic to who I was. Now, that's not to say I don't enjoy these things now. I'm at a different stage of my life. I am enjoying my journey. And so all of these wonderful experiences that I get to go through going and traveling on, you know, luxury vacations. And I live in a lovely home outside of Washington, D.C. All of these things now are with a new set of eyes and a fresh appreciation of the journey that's taken me to get here is so authentic to who I am. These are just sort of like nice to haves, not the thing I was clawing to get to earlier on in my journey.
That's so powerful. I have a question around the idea of regret. You know, there's so many women who are in midlife, you know, late 40s, 50s, even later, and they realize the thing that they are good at or the thing that they make money from no longer is working, you know? And I hear a lot of stories about women in that age group who got the new boss, who, you know, they had a great experience and now they're having to prove themselves over again, or their freedoms are taken away or whatever that is. And they're terrified to reinvent because they don't know what else to do. They feel regret. They feel anxious. It's overwhelming. How do you break that down so that someone can, you know, where they say the best way to eat an elephant, which is such a weird metaphor, one bite at a time. How do you even start if you're like, oh God, like I got to suck it up?
It's a really profoundly important question that we need to ask ourselves and be talking about more, because it goes back to, it's an existential question. Why are we here? And I think that that's the problem. We're all living on some level of autopilot for so long that we get afraid to go back and ask these basic questions of like, what do I want? And who am I? And these are very important. So for me, it starts with kind of like pulling people back to the basics of remembering. And not everyone's going to subscribe to this. So again, this is Michelle's worldview. But, we are now here. But before the moment of now here, Marnie and Michelle having this conversation, prior to all this, I was nowhere, right? Before I was born. And at some point, I'm going to be exiting this human existence. And so that leads me to more of the existential, we're spiritual beings having a human existence. Mm-hmm. We all come here on assignment to learn a lesson. I happen to believe it's how to love better and more profoundly, despite all the reasons why the world will serve up to you why you shouldn't. Right. You learn to love yourself, to love others, and we are all just walking each other home. And you can interpret that as you will. For a long time, walking myself home meant back to myself, because I had gotten so far adrift from who I truly am by chasing these things outside of me that I didn't know who I was. And I had to spend some time really getting to know me. At this point of midlife, where I left an executive career that was kind of really at the height of it, things had finally gotten easier. I wasn't in the trenches anymore. I was leading the show, and I did the jaw-dropping, stage exit left at the height. And people were like, what? If you were going to leave, it would have been sooner than this, right? Right. And for me, it came down to two things. One, not wanting to live with regret of not doing the thing that I knew was going to bring that next level of authenticity. Right. I'd already been on the journey, but I knew that there were things that I wanted to do that were not going to be done in the confines of my corporate career. You just couldn't. There are only so many hours in the day. And I definitely got that sense of like, I'm not living fully. I'm having a good life. I have no real complaints, if you will. Life is good. I have a beautiful family. I have a loving husband, a beautiful home, a great career that I worked very hard to build. And yet it feels kind of comfortable. It doesn't feel extraordinary. It doesn't feel like I'm putting it all on the table. So for those people who are struggling with the, but I had to give something up to get what I really want, let me tell you, the best thing I ever did was take the leap, because even in the profound uncertainty, it almost doesn't matter, because you feel so filled up by living your truth that you can weather all the other things. It's interesting to me. The thing that I worried about the most was, well, how am I going to pull this off financially? I am making a great salary. Right. And my family is benefiting tremendously from this. Extended family is benefiting tremendously for this. I'm taking a big gamble, but I didn't wake up every day excited to live my life. And I was, in essence, living in this narrow space that other people probably wouldn't perceive as narrow, because I've got a bigger than life personality to begin with. I'm in an extroverted career in public relations and marketing. I'm out traveling, but I knew that I wasn't really looking at the issues that I cared about. I wasn't having the conversations I wanted to have, and I wasn't having the impact that I wanted to have. Was I helping companies make more money and change their reputation and shape how they show up in the world? Sure. But I wanted to do that with people. I want to help people come alive and people to really step into their authenticity and start to live fully. That's exciting to me. And so I think the biggest regret anyone's going to have is not doing the thing they feel compelled to do, that maybe they're being held back by fear. But the reality is it's sort of like a thinly veiled wall. Once you sort of step through it, you realize it's sort of all in your head. It is all about the mindset. It is all these unknowns that aren't tangible. And it's usually we get so stuck in logic that we don't let the deep wisdom and intuition that resides in the body, right? In the soul and in the body drive the show. And that's where you really need to stop overthinking and overanalyzing and let your internal compass have at it for a bit. And I did a lot of, I've been at this now on a full entrepreneurial journey for a few years, but I spent years contemplating, standing on the edge.
What would it be like?
What would it be like? What could it be like? And man, I missed out doing it sooner, but it still is rich and exciting to have done it now. And so if anyone's standing there going, but what if? I just say, what if you're super successful? That's the other piece of this. And I guarantee you, even in the process of quote unquote reinventing, you're going to love yourself for showing up for yourself. That's what fundamentally shifted for me.
I think what you said is so powerful and profound around if you know you're meant to do something extraordinary. I think that doesn't resonate for everyone. There's people that are like, I was talking to somebody the other day. She's like, no, I definitely don't want to start my own thing. She left her corporate job, because it was so toxic. And she's like, I like to have a job and I like to do all those things. So I think what's important is that it's this calling for how you define extraordinary.
100%.
Right. Because my extraordinary and your extraordinary is something so, so different. How do you help people figure out, or what is the right question to ask themselves? Like, what does that mean for you? A life where you feel like you ran the bases of your life and you slid into the casket, battered and bruised, but like, you're like, yeah, I did that thing. I lived this one life to the full. How do you help people figure out like, what is extraordinary to you?
I think, you just hit the nail on the head. It starts with asking a very basic question, but it's the most profound question you can ask yourself. And that's, what do I want? When you start to really uncover and unpack the answers to what do I want, and you let somebody really go uncensored, journal, discuss. Look, if there are no limits, what would you do? If there were no limits, how would you show up? If you didn't perceive financial constraints, how would you live? And you let people really unpack that for themselves. They're usually pretty surprised. Very few people say, well, I'll be living in a mansion and da, da, da. They usually say things like, well, my mornings will be slower and intentional. I'll spend more time with the people I love. I'll focus on my health for once and really commit to it. I'll go to bed and allow myself to sleep without worry. I won't mull things over time and time again. It starts to become these very simple principles. But to your point, it's so unique to every individual. So, I coach as well, and I'm working with one individual right now. He's a former soldier. He was a ranger, and he's a veteran now. He had several tours of duty, and we talk about why he went through all he went through. He's incredibly passionate about helping veterans reacclimate into civilian life. He's like, it's not easy. Suicide rates among this community are incredibly high because we don't give them the tools to reacclimate. They don't really know how to, and we need to do better. And he's passionate about it. He probably wouldn't be good at it if he hadn't gone through it himself.
Right.
And he asked himself for many, many years, why did I go through this? It feels like a useless experience. And yet now he finds such great purpose in that challenge. And that's usually where it is, right? Where we have experienced challenge, heartbreak, loss, often is where you find purpose. And it's not that way for everyone. you don't have to have that experience of purpose, but certainly it was for me in understanding that money was always the thing that was held over me as the missing piece to the puzzle of my family's history. If I can just end the cycle of generational lack. I wouldn't even want to say poverty, having now gone around the world. It's a very relative term, but living hand to mouth, just getting by, making ends meet, then I will have done something historic for my family. And I realized the process of suffering through many, many uncertain days as a kid and as an adolescent and a young adult was to realize that money is really an energetic experience, and my ability to make money really became a game. And when I figured that out, I was like, oh my gosh, I've been playing checkers and not very well. And now I'm going to play chess with great intention. I see the board pieces now and how I have such a powerful influence on how things go down in my life. And before, I was operating from this place of lack that didn't really exist except for in my mind. Right.
That's so profound, right? Like, what if, oh, listener, right? All the lack, all the whatever is a construct of your mind and how you view from your past experiences and what could be possible if you step into the next identity. Even if your reinvention is like as a wealthy person or as an abundant person or as a peaceful person or whatever that is. I mean, reinvention can just be in how you experience yourself or see yourself. Yeah.
100%. Because at the end of the day, it goes back to the premise, we're all made of energy, everything, the microphone I'm using, the coffee cup here, the screen on the computer, us as beings, we're all energy. So everything is vibrating at a certain frequency. So to the extent that you want to go through the reinvention process, I'm not saying that you sit on your sofa and think good thoughts, but there is a vibration in which everything is emanating. And once you recognize that, it's about raising your frequency to that. Now, when we talk about frequency from an energetic standpoint, somebody else might understand that to their energy level in terms of passion and focus and intention. And I would say you're absolutely right. Someone else might say, well, and coupled with my actions, right? Absolutely right. But the idea is most of us immediately find a block with whatever it is that we want to be, do, or have. We find a reason or an excuse or a construct that says it's not possible for you. And so then we act accordingly. We act in accordance to our beliefs. And so the more that we can push back on that and say, well, wait a minute, this is all about frequency and energy. So the ability for you to go from somebody who's had nothing to has a lot and lives a very abundant life is a matter of shifting beliefs, because those impact your actions, which will then allow you to show up on a frequency that matches that which you want to be, have, or do. That is actually the magic formula. But in that is baked action. You must take action in accordance with your beliefs, and that will bring you to a certain frequency of which then will be your experience in life. I think what a lot of people get stuck on is, I've been journaling, I've been visualizing.
Yes.
And they're like, but what steps have you taken in alignment with that? Most people don't. They don't get to that next step of action.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you, because I think I was just listening to somebody and they were talking about how, it's so easy to say like, oh, I did the meditation, I did the journaling, I did all this stuff and it's not working. And that we can get stuck because that old identity and those old beliefs and the old paradigms just are like looking for something to hold on to, like
they're
it's like your white couch that is like, give me some cat hair, like, let me show it to you. So when someone is doing the things and they still feel like, hey, Michelle, like I'm doing the things. Maybe I'm even taking some action and it still feels like I'm stuck. What is the wisdom or advice or tips that you can give people who are in that liminal space and it just feels like challenging?
It's interesting because I've had a couple people say, oh, visualization doesn't work for me. And then we sit down and we actually unpack. Give me a sense of what your week has been like and what you've done. Let's have some accountability around that and let's take a bigger look. And lo and behold, I'm like, okay, so you did one thing one day. It felt big. I get it. It feels big, but this is about showing up with some consistency and time, and it will happen. And a lot of people, even though they're doing those things, they actually don't believe it's possible. And if you don't believe it's possible, if you don't suspend disbelief long enough for a new belief to be entrenched, you're not going to be able to make that change. It's almost like I'm a great person to bring to a movie because it doesn't matter how many times I've seen the movie. I can suspend disbelief and cry like it's the first time I've seen the sad movie or the movie touching movie. It's like, you've seen this one 100 times. I'm like, and every time it hits me right here. And it's that kind of Walt Disney magic, the suspension of disbelief that's necessary in this human experience if you want to be a true alchemist. And I think all of your listeners want that. They want the magic, right? We all want to be part of Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. We want to become our own alchemists and make our own magic. The problem is we're looking for it outside of us. We're looking for evidence outside of us. We're not seeing it outside of us. And the first change that needs to happen is within us.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that you talk about consistency of your action, because I can think of people who've like said, oh, I've tried it all. And I'm like, all? Literally? Like, exactly what? How did you show up for that? You know, like, I think there's such a tendency to do the blame game because we don't want to like pull the refrigerator out and look and see what's behind there. When you think about what courage really looks like, because people would say to you like, oh, you're so courageous. You left the corporate thing and that's so big and dramatic. But what's the daily, when you see your executives and these CEOs on a global level, like really impacting their own lives, what are the small courageous steps they take on a daily basis?
This is going to sound so anti-corporate, and it's not meant to. It's just that we don't talk in these terms in the business setting. And one of the most powerful things anyone can do to become more courageous, because it's something we don't allow ourselves instinctively as humans, and that is to be loving toward ourselves.
Self-compassion.
It's so powerful. And yet we feel that when we do that, we're somehow being weak. Oh, we're not being hard enough on ourselves. We're not disciplined enough. No, I'm sorry. The days that I get the most, can we swear on the show? The most.
Yeah, oh my God. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Are the days when I'm very disciplined because I love myself enough to know that if I want to get to that next level of authenticity, I need to push through and make the edits on the book. I need to push through and finish that chapter that's been hanging over my head. Or I need to get through that course that I'm developing because I know there's somebody that needs to have that message. I might not know who it is, but I know it's that person's out there. And so I love myself enough to have the discipline to get it done. And so when I say small steps of courage start with loving yourself, the reason why I say that is because trust, self-trust is it's sort of the fairy dust, if you will, for making your life really magical. You cannot really step into that next level of reinvention unless you're willing to trust yourself. You're not going to trust yourself if you don't have love and compassion for yourself. And the reason why I say trust is so important, and most people don't, we overanalyze everything. We stay in our headspace. We overthink every decision becomes this really complex thing. And when I have clients that are stuck there, because I've lived that, I know that that's a lived experience for me. I can say, look, I was a really good worker, B, for a really long time. I was the girl. I was the get things done. I also stuck in my head and played really small so that other people could take credit for the work I did for many, many years, because I didn't trust myself. I didn't think I had earned my ability to be there, which was really my own construct. When I stopped and realized how ridiculous that sounded, and if I were talking to a friend, I would have been like, you take your stand up for yourself.
Right.
Give the answer when they're talking in the meeting, own your space at the table. And yeah, I couldn't do it for myself. That was a huge awakening for me. And it came late. I had a toddler in tow. I was a vice president. I was globetrotting. Everyone thought from the outside I had it made, but I was reeked with insecurity.
Wow. Imposter syndrome. Is that?
Oh, total imposter syndrome. Like, if they find out that I'd really rather stay home with my toddler and be a mom, they're never going to let me come into the meeting, forget having a seat at the table. So I have to pretend. So I had a chip on my shoulder. I was pretending. I was holding back. I was careful about everything I said. And you don't respect yourself. And so here's the thing. You're training other people on how to treat you. I had to get to a place where I had seriously 0 fucks left to give.
Yes.
And say, why am I apologizing because I want to be a mom? Oh, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom when I was younger. And that to me was kind of weak. Like, we didn't have any money. Why didn't she have a career? Why couldn't it be different? It would be better for us if she did. Terrible way of looking at it. But that was my kid's view of the scenario. And then I became a mother and I was like, damn, this is pretty good stuff. Now I get why my mom wanted to do it. And now I got to figure out how to make all these things work. When I stopped worrying about what everyone else thought about me, and when I started to really think, hey, what I want matters, and I think I'm going to be able to have my cake and eat it too. At least I want to try.
Right. At least try. It
all might come down on top of me, but let's see. Funny enough, none of the pieces came down on top of me. Instead, people are like, what else? The universe started showing up for me because I started showing up for me. And that was the thing I did not believe could be possible. That when I started having boundaries, the universe said, got it. That you need more money because you're a working mom and it's expensive where you live and you can't keep just waiting and holding on for the next room. You need more. Okay. How much? I was in shock. Like, I didn't come back. I was on maternity leave. My son's about ready to turn 18. So I feel like I've had time to process this in order to share it. But at the time, I stayed home for 6 months, which was a huge amount of time here in the States, right? Like, we don't get maternity leave like that.
Right.
It was unheard of. And yet I said, look, I don't have great daycare set up. I don't know what I'm doing and I need to take more time. So I took some unpaid time at the end, which was a little bit of a scramble for us, to be honest, but we weren't traveling at that point with a toddler or an infant. And right before I came back, I said, look, I don't want to come back every single day. Now, this is 18 years ago. There was no
this
remote
is before
work.
the pandemic. Right. Yeah.
I took the metro every day in and out of DC 5 days a week. I worked 12-hour days in a corporate setting. I was on planes, trains, and automobiles. And I said, I don't want to come back every single day. I have a really heavy workload to begin with. I have hours with Europe that start super early and some with China that go really late at night for me. Can I work from home a few days a week? And I thought they were going to say no, and I'd have to quit and it'd be this big thing. And they were like, well, let's try and see. I was the first in my industry to do something that no one had asked before.
Wow.
No one had done successfully. And so I said, well, I'm going to make it work. And then I was like, and I'm going to need a raise, just FYI. And instead of laughing at me, which I was convinced they were going to do, well, how much? And I was like, oh my God, they're worried that I'm not going to come back. This is good. This is some leverage.
Right. You have value. Yeah.
Value. Oh my God. Who knew? And then, I started to realize, wait a minute. I have been holding back, so terrified to ask for too much or to be too much that I really wasn't asking for anything. And it started to become a domino effect of like, wow, okay, what if I just started to say what I wanted? Like, I don't want to work on Sundays. I've worked every Sunday of my life before having a baby. I want a day with my family, which I know for younger people who may be listening, they'll be like, what are you talking about? But there was a time in the corporate world where the expectation was your time was not your own because you're being paid, and the better you got paid, the more you owed them, and you just gave it all.
I think that still exists, Michelle.
It does still exist in some arenas, but I will tell you, I've learned so much. You know, I still have ties to the corporate world. I still do some consulting. The millennials, and God help us, the Zs, who I'm raising one, have taught me so much about having boundaries and priorities in ways that I never knew from my own Gen X, group, where we were like afraid to say what.
Yeah.
So for all the stuff we sling at them for being entitled or this and the other, we can debate that until the sun goes down. I do think there's a lot to be said about living true to your values. It's something that my peer, Gen Xers had to really learn, that it was okay to have values and want to live according to them, because there was a time when we saw those people who were doing that. We're like, well, isn't that nice for them? Right? Like, that's not reality. And I'm here to say, no, we need to push back. We should be living according to our values. And when we do better work. We're better for 100%,
100%. And that goes back to your thing about reinvention and wanting to live an extraordinary life. And if you're in a situation where you are doing that and you're not being met, then you're not crazy. You're not right. Because I think there's that, like, the old way and the new way. And it's so confusing, right? Because you have people in corporate that are 100% the old way. You have these people that are like testing the boundaries, and then it's really hard I think it's hard to keep advocating for yourself when you keep getting the like, no. And then that's where you go, I have to trust myself. This is maybe not a fit, or I need to be doing something different, because the limiting belief is it's always going to be like this, or why bother? Because, right?
Yeah. And so let me go back to that point, because we talked about why trust is so important in self-trust. Yes. We have innate GPS systems built within us, right? We have intuition. Intuition is not some wishful thinking, guesswork about life. It really is ancient wisdom. We are connected to this intelligent universe with this intuition. We often say, what is your gut? We ask people, what does your gut tell you? And there's a reason for that. There is, at a gut level, it is your second brain, this sense of we already know the answer, but we've lived in such a data-driven world where we analyze things through a headspace that we override the gut. We override the intuition. And we got to get back to a place where we actually allow our internal guidance system, our intuition, direct us forward. And so I'll tell you a little anecdote. One of the big aha moments for me came in my 20s. I was working, making bank, climbing the ladder, doing all the things. And I had no sense of self in that. My self was being invented through the accolades, the titles, the promotions. And, one would argue that back then they're like, well, of course you don't know who you are. You're only in your 20s, and nobody knows who they are in their 20s, and you're becoming. And right. I now often say, look, you want to get a lot of experience, but you already know who you are. And the problem is, if you don't claim that and listen to your intuition, the world will tell you who you are. And then you're going to be stuck with that for however many decades. Right. Awakening of like, wait, I've just been on autopilot because that's what I was told to want, have, and be, and do. And that's not who I am. I got to a place where I was physically so run down because I was on a scholarship for graduate school, full ride, working full time as one of the youngest communications director in a very large organization. I was running from to and fro, really didn't have time to eat, really didn't have time to think. And I was just on this go, 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 achieve, 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 achieve. And yet my body was slowly but surely shutting down.
Yeah,
I was spiraling into depression. And back then, many moons ago, we didn't even talk about any of these things, right? So I wouldn't have been able to put a name to it. I just thought I was really tired, exhausted, burnout maybe, but I just needed a weekend to catch up. Well, that catch up came in the form of me not being able to get my body out of bed because I literally had just worn myself out to the point of mononucleosis. I was having frequent migraines to the point of having to go into the hospital and get injections because nothing was touching these migraines. And I kept pushing. It's just part of life. If you want to achieve great things, you got to put up with great things and big things.
The badge, the power through badge. Yeah.
Just keep pushing. No, I learned the hard way. I mean, I got to the point of really almost not being here because I was so sacrificial of my own body and living in a headspace and operating, but I'm like doing so well and I'm getting all these things. And yet I was shutting down. My body was so shut down. And I say that now as like, I recognize when something is out of line, like a pin dropping now.
Right. Yep.
A bulldozer could have gone into my building. An earthquake could have happened back then, and I wouldn't have been aware because I was so out of alignment. And that's exactly what happened. It literally was like a train crash kind of experience in my life. All of the house of cards had to come down. I had to be brought to my absolute knees to recognize this is not the way. If you're not going to listen to reason, which, all these people that were saying, you probably need to slow down. You probably need to take another approach of like, these are people who aren't achieving big things. So they don't understand.
Right. They don't understand. Yeah. Now, terminal uniqueness. You don't understand. I can do it.
It's great for you, but not for me. You're so unique in that. And the reality is our bodies know, our intuition, that gut sense, we all have it. The question is to what degree you have actually honed it. Because you allow it out. You allow it to help you make decisions. And I always say, if you had to, under duress, in this moment, make a decision, and you don't have to worry about what the consequences are, in the sacred space that I am holding for you, what would you decide? Oh, and clients are very free flowing with, well, I would do this. And I'm like, and there is your answer.
Right. And there's your answer.
And then they're like, but I can't do that. And I'm like, why can't you do that? I don't know. It's just counterintuitive, right? Often the right thing is often counterintuitive to societal expectations.
And that's why radical living and extraordinary living our mission collectively is to make that the norm so that you can get off the roller coaster and enjoy the damn ride. Think about
it. The more people who are living aligned, listening to their intuition, allowing that to guide them rather than fear, can you imagine what a much more peaceful and productive, exciting, harmonious experience of life we would all be having right now?
Amen. Amen. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you for hours. Definitely. Imran, our producer, we need to get Michelle Rios back on the show. This has been so fun. My last question for you is, if you were to sort of synthesize everything you've said, and I know you call like your one-on-one coaching, it's like this 2% shift, right? Like if you were to synthesize it down into what is possible from making just a 2% shift to perform better, make more money, find more peace, have more joy, what does it boil down to in Michelle's world?
It's the inner work. Mm-hmm. We have to stop looking outside of ourselves for the answers. You already have the answers. If you're going to work with someone like Marnie or myself, you realize that the journey is all internal. And the more we can bring you home to yourself, the more you start to shine, the more you start to bring into the world all of the things you want to do, have, and be. And the more the world gets to experience you living fully.
Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh. Ladies, I mean, literally rewind. There's so many mic drop moments in this episode. You are so inspiring. And the fact that you, and I think it's just so inspirational. Like, you know, you had that experience in your 20s, then here you are still, you know, like up the ladder. Like we have to like force ourselves to get through it. And the more that we can understand that like there is no prize at the end for sucking it up. And we can start today to reinvent. And I think that's so powerful. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed and we get to have these conversations.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yay. Ladies, make sure you check out Michelle. You can find her on Instagram, Facebook. Definitely check out her Live Your Extraordinary Life podcast. We'll have links to all that in the show notes. You can go to michelleriosofficial.com and find out more about that 2%. We're just so happy that you are here. And remember, above all, it's your life. So life check yourself and make it happen for you. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Listen, if you're feeling stuck, I want you to know you're not alone and you don't have to settle for it. I've created a free quiz to help you pinpoint what's draining your energy and exactly how you can fix it. So head over to decodeyourdestinyquiz.com and take the 60-second quiz right now. That's decodeyourdestinyquiz.com. And if you're ready to dive deeper, you can book a free no obligation consultation at marnibatista.com/private coaching. That's Marni, M-A-R-N-I, Batista, B-A-T-T-I-S, as in Sam, T-A.com/private coaching, all one word. Let's take the first step to creating a life you love on your terms. I'm Marni, and I'll see you next time.